She stood quietly by the rusted tea stall on the edge of the station platform, her small hands clutched around a cracked steel cup. No one knew her name. No one cared to ask. She was just the girl with the empty eyes, the one who swept floors in exchange for scraps, until the day she was sold for a cup of coffee. It was a muggy morning. The kind where dust clung to your skin and hope stuck in your throat. The tea seller, Rafik, poured a cheap coffee mix into a chipped ceramic mug, handed it to a man in a wrinkled blue shirt, and, without hesitation, pointed to the girl. "Take her," he muttered. "She's yours now." The man laughed, as if he'd just been handed a used radio or a busted fan. He looked the girl over, barely 10, skin smudged with soot, wearing a dress 2 sizes too big. "For real?" he asked. "Just for this?" Rafik shrugged. "She eats my food. Sleeps behind the stove. More trouble than she's worth." And just like that, she was his. The man's name was Jamil. He didn't ask her name either. She didn't protest. No screams. No tears. Just silence, as if her soul had learned long ago that no one would hear her anyway. Jamil walked with long strides, his shoes slapping the concrete, while she shuffled behind him, head down, her bare feet cracking on the burning pavement. That night, she found herself in a dusty shed on the outskirts of a village she'd never heard of. He left her there with a threadbare blanket, a rusty water pot, and no words. But what happened over the next weeks, that's what no one could have predicted. Jamil wasn't kind. But he wasn't cruel either. He was just absent. He would leave before dawn, come back late at night, and toss her food without looking her way. She cleaned his shed. Washed his clothes in the river. Sat under the banyan tree for hours with nothing but silence and distant memories of her mother's voice, soft, melodic, and forever gone. One evening, after a heavy monsoon rain, she found a small bird with a broken wing lying in the mud. It trembled, too weak to fly, its eyes wide with fear. She took it in her hands, carried it to the shed, and wrapped it in part of her blanket. For days, she fed it with soaked grains, talked to it in whispers no one else would understand. She named it Noor. Jamil noticed the bird one night and scowled. "It'll die," he said coldly. "Don't waste time." But it didn't. Noor healed. And something inside the girl began to heal too. Jamil watched from a distance as the girl laughed, really laughed, for the first time while Noor fluttered clumsily around her. It did something to him. Something he couldn't explain. He started coming home earlier. Left her better food. Bought her a pair of shoes. One evening, he asked, "What's your name?" The girl paused, then said softly, "They used to call me Zoya." "Zoya," he repeated. "It means life." She nodded. Jamil sat on the threshold that night, smoking a bitty, staring at the stars. "My daughter was your age," he said, almost in a whisper. "She didn't make it. Neither did her mother." Zoya looked at him, unsure if she was allowed to ask questions. But she didn't need to. His silence was heavy enough to say everything. That night marked the start of something neither of them had planned. Jamil began to teach her how to read. He brought home tattered books and taught her letters under a flickering lantern. She learned fast, eager, curious, like she had been waiting her whole life for this. She told him stories of her past. How her mother had died when she was 6. How a man promised her father work in the city, and they never saw each other again. How she ended up with Rafik. How she never even knew what a birthday was. Jamil bought her a small cake the next week. "Happy birthday," he said awkwardly, handing it to her with trembling hands. "But today isn't." "Doesn't matter," he interrupted. "From now on, it is." They shared the cake under the stars. But life has a way of testing fragile joy. One day, men came to the village, government workers, loud, authoritative, looking for illegal labor in child trafficking. Zoya heard them first and ran to Jamil, fear wide in her eyes. "You need to hide," he said. "I don't want to go," she cried. "They'll send me away." He knelt beside her, held her shoulders. "You don't belong to anyone, Zoya. Not me. Not them. You belong to yourself. And you deserve more than this shed and my broken past. The officers arrived. One of them asked questions. Another took notes. Jamil didn't lie. He told them he found her. That she'd been sold. That he took her in, but never treated her as a servant. She's my daughter now, he said, voice firm. She calls me Abba. Zoya's eyes filled with tears. She hadn't said it out loud before. But in her heart, it had already been true. The officers didn't take her that day. But they returned with forms and rules. Jamil would have to register her. Officially adopt her. Get her into school. It took months. Long visits to government offices. Paperwork he couldn't read. A bribe he could barely afford. But he did it. The date her school uniform arrived, Zoya ran around the yard like Noor on its first flight. She hugged Jamil tight and said, "You didn't buy me for coffee. You saved me." He smiled, eyes misty. "No, Zoya. You saved me." Years passed. Zoya grew strong, sharp, and full of light. She topped her class, spoke at town events, and started a small organization for abandoned children. Every time someone asked about her story, she'd start the same way. "I was sold for a cup of coffee. But someone saw more in me than anyone else ever had." And every time, people would cry not just because of her pain, but because of her power. Her strength. Her belief that even from the deepest sorrow, love can rise like dawn over a long night. Because she wasn't just a girl with an empty cup anymore. She had become a woman who overflowed with hope and poured it generously into others.